thriving despite obstacles, promoting resilience in individuals who stutter. It is my belief that everybody deserves to live a fulfilling life. And it's my hope that you take just even one small piece of this talk away with you that will enable you to enhance your capacity to thrive, to flourish, and to live. So today, the talk is going to be a little bit different maybe than what you're used to. Active, extremely experiential. I'm going to really ask you to step up to the plate, participate. I'd like you to share your thoughts with me. I'd like to hear your ideas. I want everybody to really participate because the success of the talk is heavily dependent upon that. And we have cameras in the room. So having said all this, straight up off the top of your heads, what are some of the thoughts and feelings in your bodies having heard my instructions just now?
I'm getting out of here fast.
So that's a thought, I would say. I'm going to put that up on.
He's a former bank.
What else is going on?
What if I screw up?
Oh, okay. Lovely. Okay, what if I screw up? What else? Yeah.
I was just at the yoga. I was relaxed. I'm not so relaxed.
Oh, a feeling. Thank you. Lovely. Okay. Feeling.
Tense.
Tense. Not relaxed. What else? Yes.
I am scared.
Okay. So that goes over right here. Thank you for sharing. What else? Yes.
Anxious.
Anxious. Anybody have any physical responses in their bodies, in any parts of their bodies? Anybody feeling anything in their stomach, in their throat, chest?
Stiff neck.
Stiff neck. Okay. So we've got
That's personality.
body responses. I have a perpetual stiff neck. What else? What else you got? Come on, what else you got? That's it?
Butterflies.
Butterflies in my stomach. Yeah. Well, anything else? Anybody else tuning in to what their body felt a couple of minutes ago when I made those comments? Yes.
Well, fun. To me, it was fun.
To you, it was
Interaction
fun.
was fun. Yeah.
Beautiful. Let me put that over here. Because that's really important. Anybody else feel anything in their bodies? Feel any tightness anywhere in the chest? Anybody get a headache?
Dry mouth.
Dry mouth. There you go. Okay, so we have. And how do all of these thoughts, feelings, sensations in your body, how do they translate in the way you're going to behave today in this talk? How would that how would that impact upon your behavior in this workshop?
Well,
Yes.
How involved you are,
It would affect,
whether you get involved or not.
yeah, it would affect. So I guess for most of the comments that I'm hearing, which are normal human emotion, you would kind of be uninvolved or just kind of take a step back, right, based on those comments I made to you at the beginning of the talk. So I'm not going to be so involved, would be under the behavior. Okay, so let's put behavior over here. Not involved. Okay, so that was really a great example of behavior. How else would your behavior, anybody else have any feeling of how their behavior is affected after having said all that and after having gone through all this rigmarole? How is it going to impact upon your learning? Yeah.
I'm not going to look at you as much because I don't want you to choose me.
Okay. Outstanding. So definitely, avoiding eye contact, not to be chosen. Not to be chosen. So thank you so much for sharing all these things here. And yeah, it's amazing how our thoughts drive our behavior. Because here we have these thoughts in our head, like what we have up here. Oh, I'm getting out of here fast. What if I screw up? And then it ends up with, I'm not looking at you anymore. This lovely lady may have come in here saying she's going to have a good time, and now she just wants to hide. She really wants to be behind somebody, not in the front row, right? So our thoughts drive our feelings, drive our behaviors, and then we end up doing something else. We end up changing the way we act. And so all these things here, I'm going to connect with lines. And what we have here is a circle. What we have here is a vicious cycle. We have here is a vicious cycle of thoughts, emotions, body responses, and eventually behavior.
Question.
Yes?
Do you think people have said all those things because they let them happen to themselves?
I think it's a really good question, but I need a little more clarification. Could you clarify more what you're asking?
Right now, no, I can't say.
Because I think I get what you're saying, but I want to make sure I understand you 100%.
Okay.
Do you,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right now, I'm
Not able to.
clarify.
Okay, so what I'm getting from what you're saying is, are people saying all these things because they've had experiences, they've had past experiences that have made them feel this way in the past, and these reactions have been, this whole cycle has been repeated over and over again, and people might be used to that?
I hope not. That's as much as an answer that I am able to give you that's truth or that's honest.
Okay, sure. Well, let's look at it again. Let's revisit it again once we get a little more detail into the cycle, okay? Thank you for asking. And I'll see if maybe I can answer you a little more as we go along. So there we had our reactions, and this is kind of a picture of what we call a cognitive model. And it's called cognitive because cognitions are thoughts. And we mentioned all these different thoughts that we had after I made those comments to you. And you can see that the arrows are bidirectional. So each component of the circle, or the vicious cycle, affects or impacts upon the other component of the cycle. And this model is relevant to stuttering in many ways. Can anybody think of any other examples, looking at the model, of how this model relates to stuttering, or what happens when there is an anticipated stuttered event or an adverse event? Anybody think of any examples of how this relates to stuttering? Yes?
Well, I'm just thinking of if you've had a negative experience or stuttering on a certain sound, a certain word, a certain situation, you might think that the word is, that when the word comes up again, you stutter on it, your feeling might be anxiousness, there might be physical symptoms, and the result is you stutter again. So I guess I'm just, in terms of using that chart with regards to...
Do you want a job? Because you could come up here and give us That was really very beautifully said, and it flows right into some of the examples that I gave you here and some of the things I'm going to talk about in a minute. So here are just some arbitrary examples that you might relate to. You can see that the components of this model are intertwined and that the arrows are bidirectional. So again, they affect each other. So So I feel really anxious. I just know I'm going to block. Or I avoid speaking in large groups, and I believe that I am uninteresting and unpopular. That will result in the behavior, so I'll avoid speaking in large groups. I feel ashamed when I stutter, so that might be a feeling that might result in certain physical symptoms, as a gentleman just said a minute ago. And you experience severe blocks, and then you might feign, as this lady said a couple of seconds ago, disinterest, or you might avoid eye contact. And as you just said a second ago, the development of stuttering and the maintenance of stuttering can fit right into this cognitive model with the example that you just gave. So little David stutters on the first sound of his name when he is introduced, and this happens several times. Several times he's introduced and he has to say his name. He says, David. And after this happens a few times, introductions may begin to trigger anxiety in David, and then he develops a belief or an expectation that he always stutters on his name. So you get that overgeneralized, pervasive belief that transcends everything and may not be based 100% in reality, but is of course understandable why you would see reality that way. And then, as a result, what is the resulting behavior going to be? David will avoid. David may avoid eye contact. He may have some secondary characteristics like blinking his eyes during introductions. He may just not want to say his name. He may not want to meet people, or he may want his mom to make the introductions for him. Joseph Sheehan in 1970 created the Iceberg Metaphor to show how stuttering changes over time. So when you describe an iceberg, how would you basically describe it? What would you say it looks like? What are the characteristics of an iceberg? Yeah, so you've got the mountain on top, and then what else? Most of it's hidden. That's correct. And then the rest of it's hidden. And it looks like the larger part is hidden under the water, and the tip of the iceberg is what we see right on top. So he made this metaphor and this analogy where what's at the top of the iceberg are the overt symptoms of speech, the blocks, the prolongations, the repetitions, and then under the water is what we don't see, which are the emotions, that some of the things that we talked about a few minutes ago, the fear, the anxiety, those kinds of feelings that we talked about that are under the water. And if we really think about this, it sort of translates into what we just talked about when I opened up this talk to you. And whatever is under the water, fear, anxiety, hopelessness, will circulate up and affect the speech and the severity of the stuttering. And then the severity of the stuttering in turn, as a vicious cycle, will go back down under the water and affect what's going on there, making those emotions more complex, increasing them or intensifying them further. Therefore, in more recent times, there have been assessment protocols created. One of them is an example that I have on the board on the slide here called the OASIS. And that's the overall assessment of the speaker's experience of stuttering. And they're taking a look at stuttering involving more than just physical overt symptoms, but really taking a look at the way that the stuttering symptoms can affect the way a person feels as a communicator, his attitudes, his beliefs, and the specific way that he or she may limit the quality of his or her life. So let's take a look at some of the types of questions that are on this assessment tool, so you can also see the connection between the questions that I asked you when you first came in and the responses